like to talk next about a grammar overview, specifically about common tenses that you may have to teach in your ESL lessons when you're teaching students. These are typically many of the tenses that you will be involved with, the types of questions that you may be asked by your students to go over with them, to explain. And I think having this overview, this general background knowledge of what the main tenses are, is going to be very helpful for you as a teacher. These are things that I think all teachers of ESL really ought to know. So I'd like to begin by looking at two sentences and comparing them. Let's have a look at these two sentences. So we have the first sentence, Shakespeare wrote many plays, and the second sentence, Stephen King has written many books. So if we consider what the differences are in those two sentences, differences in how they look, their form, and also in their meaning, let's take a look at the first sentence. This is using the word wrote. The second sentence, Stephen King's sentence, is using has written. So what's the meaning there? Well, the main difference, the difference that we need to remember, is that these are different tenses. The first tense, number one, is the past simple tense. Shakespeare wrote, past simple. The second tense, has written, is present perfect. So let's focus on these two tenses. What's the difference in meaning? Well, the first example, the past simple, we use it to talk about actions which are finished. Finished actions in the past, completed actions in the past. So Shakespeare lived about 400 years ago and he's dead. He's been dead for a long time. All his writing is finished. Therefore, we can use the past simple tense for finished actions in the past. The second example, Stephen King has written. Stephen King is still alive. He's still writing. He's a successful writer who's still doing his writing. We use the present perfect here because the present perfect is used for actions which started in the past and they continue now, or they continue to have an effect now. So Stephen King started writing books in the 1970s and he continues to write today. Therefore, it started in the past and it continues now. Therefore, we can use the present perfect tense. Let's look at how the words are formed here. Two types of verbs I want to look at with the past simple. So, looking at past simple, and the two types are regular and irregular. Regular verbs in the past have the construction ed at the end, ed. Now it may be pronounced slightly differently, but when you write it, it's always ed, whether it's lived or finished. You have a d ending or a t sound, finished or lived. But the important thing is when you write it, it's always written with an ed ending. These are the regular verbs. Irregular verbs in the past don't have the ed ending. So we're talking about verbs such as slept, went, did, So you may want to point out to students these differences in regular and irregular. I think the regular ones are quite easy. If you can remember which ones are regular, that's the trick. The other area I'd like to look at with number 2 is the construction of the present perfect. Now, in English, the verbs in English have three main parts. First, we have the basic verb. It's sometimes known as the stem. It's just the verb with no changes. Things like go, do, stop, listen, speak. So this is what we call the basic verb, or the stem. And then the second, we have 3. The second one is the past tense. And the third part of the verb that we need to think about when teaching grammar is the past participle. So to give you an example, let's take do, the verb do. By the way, if you put the word to in front of it, to do, then it becomes the infinitive, to do, to go, to look, to speak. These are what we call the infinitive. But this is the stem, the basic verb. Then we have did, and the past participle is done. Do, did, done. Let's take another one. Let's say speak. We have speak, past tense, spoke, and past participle, spoken. And regular verbs also will fit in with their pattern. So things like talk, talked, talked. There are some tricky ones also, not many, but verbs like put. We have put, put, put. It's the same, it doesn't change. But generally, these are the patterns that they will follow. This type of irregular pattern or regular with the ed form. So when we're forming the present perfect tense, we use the verb have, for example, have done, or has. And we use the past participle. Okay. I have done, for example. He has. So when we're using the present perfect, we need to use have, has, plus past participle. That's the present. If we want to go into the past, then all we do is we change the verb have, and it becomes past tense, had. And we keep the past participle, so had done, had spoken, had talked, had driven, etc. And this is the past perfect. Present perfect, past perfect, because had is the past tense verb. Now, I mentioned earlier that we use the present perfect when we're talking about actions that started in the past and continue now, or continue to have an effect now. So if I give you a sentence like this, if I say, John has had an accident. John has had an accident. And I compare that with John had an accident. If we look at the first example here, John has had an accident. Where do you think John is now? Where could he be if he has had an accident? Well, he may be injured, he may be cut or bleeding, he may be in his car, in a crash at the side of the road, he may be in hospital. But whatever has happened, it continues to have an effect now. That's why we say John has had an accident. The effects are continuing now. And that's an example of using the present perfect for an action which continues to have an effect now. Started in the past and still affects John, in this case, now. If we say John had an accident, past simple, where is John now? Well, we don't know. He might be fine, he may be back at work, healthy, he may be dead, we don't know. All we know was, at some point in the past, there was an accident involving John, and it's finished, and it doesn't affect John